Hi, I'm Doron Ofir. I'm a reality television casting director in unscripted television, and I'm best known for these guys.
There's here! Hello!
Situation.
What's the bitch?
So I'm the executive casting director of Jersey Shore, and we're gonna run through how we made that show, how we cast that show, and then we're going to cast Jersey Shore, the movie. This is the Big Recast. I'll never forget how Jersey Shore started for me. I got a call from one of the greatest execs in television history, Charli XCX, and she was at the time the head of VH1. She said, hey, listen, I got this really interesting tape, and it's about Guidos. And I paused and I said, Guidos? And she was like, yeah, and it's called, The Search for America's Biggest Guido. What do you think of it? And I said, well, listen, I'm a New Yorker. I grew up in New York. So I was like, and I grew up in New York in the late 80s, 90s, where everybody was a Guido. The girls would drive a Monte Carlo with a bumper sticker that said, Guidettes have the power. To me, the Guido culture was always a part of New York, but Indiana doesn't know what Guidos are. And Kentucky doesn't know what Guidos are. She was like, I want you to go out and I want you to prove that Guidos still exist today. Do you think that they are a thing? And I said, well, yes. They're all at the Jersey Shore. I'd like to point something out that's really interesting about Guido culture. It was considered a slur, but not by Guidos. And it is traditionally an Italian American who is unabashedly proud of who they are. It was about self-love, family, and God. I was worried that the fact that this would be something that would be sort of negative. I had to come up with the concept of how do I find these Guidos and what do I tell them? So immediately I released a website and it was called guidoscasting.com and it exploded. So we immediately devised a plan to find the people where they are located. We would interview them in basements, recording studios, bathrooms, wherever we found them. At one point, the Guido culture in New York was sort of driven by music. And one of the biggest DJs at the time was DJ Boris, who was spinning at Sound Factory in Midtown. We went in and it was a world of throwing fists in the air and the fist pump culture. And we started to identify the cast of what would become Jersey Shore. When asked to do this interview, I shied away from it at first, but when I was told that this was from cast to screen, the cast of a reality show into a feature film, I got really excited. One of the big things in the 80s and 90s was sort of the teen romp, whether it was The Last American Virgin or Porky's or Animal House. It was the gross out kind of lose your mind over a weekend young adult film that all parents were like, you cannot go see. When was the last great, laugh out loud, roll out of your seat comedy movie? I think it should be Jersey Shore, the movie. And if I had the ability to cast it, I think I have the cast. So Snooki, maybe the most famous of the whole cast, maybe not, it's arguably, but she's maybe the most beloved, also could be argued. In my feature film version, Snooki would be played by Charli XCX. And what's funny about Snooki was that Snooki was sort of the unexpected party girl. She was the youngest in the group by age and maturity, but the show became a hit the moment that Snooki got punched in the face. It was that episode that immediately skyrocketed that show into the #1 slot. The reason was because the family that had not come together yet had come together to support her. So she is the linchpin to what I believe was the ultimate success of the show. And the ultimate party girl in 2025 is Charli XCX. She's raw, she's a badass, she's cool, and she's unapologetic. And I'm not saying that Charli needs to get punched in the face, although watching her eat a pickle, I'd pay money to see that. The next kind of, character I would think is Mike the Situation. On the show, he was the person to break the fourth wall. I had never met anybody who talked about himself almost in a third person. The confidence, the swag, the way he broke the fourth wall. It was a tutorial on the game of the pickup. There was no way for us to know that the show, he would become such a pivotal character from villain to hero, how he went from the antagonist and super effed up to redemption, another one with 1,000 lines, gym tan laundry. This is all Mike. Mike will go down as one of the most naturally funny and witty characters in reality television history. He's an iconic reality television superstar. And in the film version, my first thought immediately is Pete Davidson. And the reason I say that is because 1, Pete Davidson is super likable. 2, he's from Staten Island. 3, in real life, his exes are bar none. Whether it's Kim Kardashian to Ariana Grande. And what better representation to Mike in real life than Pete Davidson? Okay, that brings me to JWoww. So now JWoww was, God, she's somebody that I love. Talk about a bad bitch. So Jenny was a club promoter. She was a VIP host. She was working the angle of cigar lounges around Long Island. She was a car model. And she was doing it on her own. She didn't really want to do the show at first. She was like, why would I do that? She was a boss girl before boss girl was a title. And in a modern retelling and the greatest weekend hangover version of Jersey Shore, my casting pick for Jenny Farley is Megan Thee Stallion. What's interesting about Megan Thee Stallion also is that her persona and music is one, but her real life and her acting ability is she brings sort of raw depth. There is an emotional element to Megan Thee Stallion, and as a performer, she can lean into both. And I do think that once again, audiences would clamor to see her in a role like this. One of the most iconic episodes of Jersey Shore was when she punched Mike in the face. So does Megan Thee Stallion get to punch Pete Davidson in the face? Again, I would pay money to see that. Pauly D is a real interesting one too. So Pauly came from Rhode Island and he was a DJ to a club of 40 people at the time. But he had heard about the casting call. And he decided that he was gonna make the greatest casting video audition of all time. And we're going back to a time when we were getting them on VHS. And so I'm watching this video and he's going through the process of his blowout. And I'm looking at his room, because I could see where he lives, right? He shot it in his bedroom, but he's got a full-on Italian flag. The television is playing in the background, and Rocky is playing, which I was like, can you get any more Italian than that? And then he gives me a weird tour, and half the apartment is taken over by a tanning bed, which he had actually purchased outright. So this is a guy that has a tanning bed in his home, and another one that became one of the most iconic one-liners and the comedy edge of Jersey Shore. So who could come out screaming, "Cabs here"? And my casting choice for that is Machine Gun Kelly. And what's funny about Machine Gun Kelly is, first of all, his track record in real life, his scandals in pop culture, the tattoos, the hair, the visuals. I'm looking at an ensemble cast that Gen Z and Gen Alpha would flock to and embrace them, because whether they've ever watched Jersey Shore or not, these heroes could represent these people, I think, at their best. Which then brings me to Sammi Sweetheart. So Sammi came to an open call. She walked in and, the first thing she said was, I'm the sweetest bitch you'll ever meet. She represented the Guido brand from a really almost soft-spoken way. In my original write-up for her, I had her as the Guido Barbie. Sammi was always authentically herself. She's one of the most interesting historical characters from a sociological perspective. We watched Sammi in one of the most volatile relationships in reality television history. One of the moments that lives rent-free in my mind, after the note, the infamous note, she was there with her glasses and her hair was down and it was smudged, from fingerprints and from crying, her glasses. And she was just looking at, I think it was Snooki and JWoww at the time, and she just kept saying, I'm not okay. I'm not okay. And it was so raw, it was so powerful, it was so emotional. You were watching a girl unravel. In any other sort of situation, you know, there would be producers or somebody in the background being like, you know, you fight back now and you become a hero to your viewers. Because Jersey Shore wasn't produced that way, it was produced, what you see is what you get. She showed vulnerability. From an acting perspective, who could fill that slot? And it's Olivia Rodrigo. And I think as a current pop princess, as somebody who has in her music shown that emotional depth, I think that she could join this ensemble cast and be a brilliant embodiment of Samantha. The next person to discuss would be Ronnie Magro. And you know, Ronnie is another interesting casting choice. Ronnie was also not full-blood Italian, from Long Island, but he was a hothead. He was a gorilla juice head, right? But he was lovable. His opening line, I believe, was never fall in love on the Jersey Shore. He broke that rule when he met Sammi, which created the ultimate triangle because first Mike the Situation wanted Sammi and then Ronnie wanted Sammi and it created a love triangle. Ultimately, Sammi chose Ronnie, whether for good or for bad is yet to be determined in life. Ronnie is another one that has some depth. And when thinking about casting Ronnie, I didn't want to go simply based on look. What I wanted to go was somebody who could embody that kind of soul, and audiences would believe Olivia Rodrigo as Sammi would fall in love with, and my choice is Dominic Fike. I thought his role in Euphoria as the drug-addicted heartthrob was mesmerizing. When casting a feature film, I want audiences to believe that a relationship could happen between Olivia Rodrigo as Sammi and Ronnie as Dominic. Which now brings me to Angelina. You know, Angelina is like secretly one of my favorite people. Angelina is a fascinating archetype. She was the most humiliated human on reality television history. And she did not crumble at it. She used that, walked away from the show, came back on the show in Family Vacation, and like kind of owns the show now. That's a hard one to cast as an actress, and I thought Doja Cat. And for me, the reason why Doja Cat is so interesting is because she's an anomaly. And I think that it would give a different depth to Angelina. And in this cast, when you start to see all the faces together in this new version of Jersey Shore for a modern era, Doja Cat fills a role that Angelina, in essence, did in her original season. She also brings emotional depth. She's also a badass. She's also a fighter. I mean, come on, she moved into the house, you know, her luggage was trash bags. So that's the movie I want to see. Which brings me to Vinny. You know, Vinny's an interesting cat also. He self-described himself as, you know, fist-pumping God. Vinny was young. And that element of Vinny, and Vinny being sort of the voice of reason and the narrator of the show in a lot of ways, he really did evolve. Vinny was also somebody who was struggling with anxiety and was sort of the non-official Guido when he was really one of the most Italian on the show. His juxtaposition was super fascinating to me. I would like to cast Troye Sivan. I think that turning Vinny gay to a modern audience would embrace queer culture in a way that hasn't been seen before. Troye Sivan is my first choice to play this role, given Troy's global fame, given his actual real-life friendship with Charli XCX, and since Vinny and Snooki did have an affair, I think that that's a really funny way of sort of gender coding in a diverse modern element. And if I got a lot of pushback about that, then my opposite is, and I know Vinny will probably appreciate this version, it's Jack Harlow. And I think that Jack Harlow brings a sort of sensitivity and sort of the everyday narrator to a film like Jersey Shore, because really Vinny is the narrator and a lot of the heart of the actual series. And just in case Vinny doesn't know who his mom would be in the movie, it would be Catherine O'Hara. Okay, so, okay, Deena. Deena is the heart and soul of the show. And, you know, Deena wasn't on the first season, but that's because she had a personal tragedy, but she was cast from day one. She was always part of the original cast. She was never meant as a replacement for Angelina. She was just able to join the cast once Angelina left, and that was a timing thing. So I just want to set the record straight on that. When she was finally able to join the show, you know, Deena from her original casting was the ultimate Guidette. The person who can give Deena some depth on a film like this with this batshit cast is Awkwafina. Awkwafina, one, is hilarious. She's loyal, she's good, she's outrageous. She really came to the forefront because I just saw that movie that she was in with Machine Gun Kelly. So again, chemistry. From a creative point of view, what better meatball than Awkwafina playing a Guido in a cast of this pop culture current superstars? I can't wait to see Awkwafina, deliver those lines that she's a blast in a glass, and her and Charli XCX as the meatballs causing trouble. I mean, you gotta picture it, and I beg you to pick a better cast than that. Nobody could have anticipated that show the way it exploded. It was like the Beatles. By season 3, when they returned, or season 2.5, when they returned to Jersey Shore, to the house, there was anywhere from 20 to 30,000 people that would fill up the roads screaming just to get a chance to see them. There were studies done after the show and why it had such an endearing non-Italian rabid fan base. That cast became a family because they all had Sunday dinner together, which is a really Italian tradition. That sort of the pasta and the meat and the fish and it was always either Mike cooking it or Vinny's mom coming and making it, and it all brought that cast together. So they were no longer strangers, they were family. And that enduring family, that enduring cast has captivated audiences for over a decade. Multiple spin-offs, including their families now. We've grown up with them and we continue to love them. And for me, the question is can it ever be done again? And I don't know. I don't know that a network would allow that in the manner it was made at the time. Would it be derivative or would it be something new? And what does a reimagining in the 2025 era of television and culture and identity look like? These were not celebrities. These are normal, everyday kids. I mean, Snooki was studying to be a vet tech. Mike, I think, worked in a gym. They all had, basic sort of jobs. None of them were like a music artist or, and again, they had no correlation of the fame that would happen to them. It was a really extraordinary testament to them as people that they were able to adapt to this kind of fame and never lose sight of who they are. Because the bottom line is if you walked up to them in the street today, they're exactly what you saw on television. I think it's safe to say that when casting reality television, when casting unscripted television, you don't wait for casting to come to you. You've got to find it. And I'll see you at the movies.